The evening sun was setting over South Chicago as Marcus Johnson walked home from his job at Save Mart grocery store. His feet were tired after standing for 6 hours straight, stocking shelves and helping customers find their items. The 17-year-old had taken this part-time job to help his mother with the bills, something he had been doing since his father passed away 3 years ago. Marcus was different from many teenagers in his neighborhood. While others spent their free time hanging out on street corners, he divided his time between studying, working, and helping at the local community center. His mother always told him, "Education is the key to a better life," and he took those words to heart. That Wednesday evening seemed like any other until fate stepped in. Marcus was walking past Lakeshore Drive, a route he usually avoided because of the fancy cars and wealthy people who barely noticed his existence. But today, he had stayed late at work to cover for a sick colleague, and this was the quickest way home. The screech of tires made him jump. About 50 feet ahead, a black Mercedes swerved violently across the road. Marcus watched in horror as the luxury car spun out of control and crashed into a tree on the side of the road. Without thinking twice, he sprinted toward the accident. Smoke was already rising from the hood of the car when Marcus reached it. Through the window, he saw two people inside, a man slumped over the steering wheel and a woman in the back seat. The woman was clearly pregnant, her hands clutching her belly as she cried out in pain. "Help! Please, someone help us!" The woman screamed, her voice filled with fear and desperation. Marcus tried the door handles, but they were locked. The driver wasn't moving, and the smoke from the engine was getting thicker. Making a quick decision, Marcus looked around and found a broken piece of concrete nearby. He wrapped his jacket around his hand, turned his face away, and smashed the rear window. "Ma'am, I'm here to help you," he said in his calmest voice, even though his heart was racing. "Can you move toward me?" The woman, who he would later learn was Sarah Mitchell, nodded through her tears. She was wearing an expensive-looking blue dress, now stained with drops of blood from small cuts caused by the accident. Marcus carefully helped her climb through the broken window, making sure no sharp glass edges caught her clothing or skin. Once Sarah was safely out, Marcus immediately called 911 on his phone. "There's been a car accident on Lakeshore Drive, near 47th Street, he reported. "There's a pregnant woman who needs medical attention and an unconscious driver still in the vehicle." While waiting for help to arrive, Marcus remembered his summer lifeguard training. He helped Sarah sit on the grass, a safe distance from the smoking car, and checked her vital signs. Her pulse was racing, but steady. He noticed she was shaking, so he gave her his jacket to keep warm. "The baby," Sarah whispered, her hands protectively covering her stomach. "I can't lose my baby." "Try to take slow, deep breaths," Marcus instructed gently. "Help is on the way. I'm not going anywhere until they arrive." True to his word, Marcus stayed with Sarah, talking softly to keep her calm. He learned she was 8 months pregnant with her first child, a girl. The driver was her regular chauffeur, James, who might have had a medical emergency while driving. When the ambulance and fire trucks arrived 5 minutes later, flames had just started to appear under the car's hood. The firefighters quickly extinguished the fire while paramedics attended to Sarah and James. Before they loaded her into the ambulance, Sarah grabbed Marcus's hand. "Thank you," she said, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "You saved us both. Please, what's your name?" "Marcus Johnson, ma'am," he replied simply, not expecting anything in return for what he had done. He watched as the ambulance drove away, its sirens wailing in the distance. Little did Marcus know that this chance encounter would change not only his life, but the lives of countless others in ways he couldn't imagine. As he finally headed home, his mother's words echoed in his mind. "God puts us in the right place at the right time for a reason." The next morning, Marcus woke up early as usual to help his mother prepare breakfast before school. As he cracked eggs into a bowl, the local news played on their small kitchen TV. His eyes widened when he saw the smoking Mercedes from yesterday's accident on the screen. "Breaking news. Wife of billionaire real estate developer Thomas Mitchell rescued by teenage hero," the reporter announced. Marcus nearly dropped the egg he was holding when he saw his own picture on the screen, a quick snapshot someone must have taken during the rescue. His mother, who had been packing his lunch, stopped and stared at the TV. "Marcus Johnson," she whispered, reading the name under his photo. "My boy. Tears formed in her eyes as she hugged him tightly. Before Marcus could explain everything to his mother, their doorbell rang. Standing outside were two men in dark suits and a familiar face. James, the chauffeur from yesterday, looking much better though sporting a bandage on his forehead. Marcus Johnson, one of the suited men asked. Mr. Thomas Mitchell would like to meet you. We can drive you to the hospital where Mrs. Mitchell is recovering. Marcus looked at his mother uncertainly. School was starting in an hour, and he had never missed a day. His mother smiled and nodded. Some things are more important than perfect attendance, son. Let me call the school. During the ride in a sleek black SUV, James thanked Marcus repeatedly. He explained that he had suffered a sudden diabetic episode while driving, which caused the accident. If you hadn't been there, he trailed off, shaking his head. At Chicago Memorial Hospital, Marcus felt out of place in his simple jeans and Save Mart work shirt from yesterday. The private wing of the hospital looked more like a luxury hotel. The suited men led him to a large private room filled with flowers and balloons. Sarah Mitchell was sitting up in bed, looking much better than the day before. Next to her sat a tall man with graying hair wearing an expensive suit, Thomas Mitchell himself. When Marcus entered, both of them looked up and smiled warmly. So you're the young man who saved my whole world, Thomas said, standing up and walking over to Marcus. His handshake was firm but friendly. Please, come sit with us. Sarah reached for Marcus's hand as he sat down. I was just telling Thomas how calm you were during the whole thing. The doctors say if you hadn't acted so quickly. She placed her other hand on her stomach. Well, both our baby girl and I are perfectly fine, thanks to you. Thomas pulled his chair closer to Marcus. Tell us about yourself, son. Sarah says you mentioned working at a grocery store. For the next hour, Marcus found himself sharing his story with the Mitchells. He told them about losing his father, helping his mother with bills, his dreams of becoming an architect, and his struggle to find opportunities in his neighborhood. The Mitchells listened intently, asking questions and showing genuine interest. I've seen your school records, Thomas said, surprising Marcus. Straight A's, perfect attendance, president of the architecture club, very impressive. But what really impresses me is your character. You didn't hesitate to help strangers in danger, and you stayed until help arrived. Sarah smiled at her husband, and they seemed to share a silent conversation. Thomas turned back to Marcus with a serious expression. We'd like to help you, Marcus. Whatever you need. College tuition, job training, anything. Name it. Marcus sat quietly for a moment, thinking carefully about his answer. This was his chance, but he didn't want just a handout. He wanted an opportunity to prove himself. Sir, he said finally, looking Thomas in the eye, I don't want money. What I'd really like is a chance to learn from you. An internship at your company if possible. I want to understand how real estate development works, how buildings get designed and built. I want to earn my way. The answer seemed to surprise and please the Mitchells. Thomas leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. You know what, Marcus? You just proved I was right about you. You're exactly the kind of person we need in this industry. The news of Marcus's internship at Mitchell Developments spread quickly through his neighborhood. Some people congratulated him, while others whispered that it wouldn't last. But Marcus was determined to prove himself, no matter what anyone said. His first day at the company started early on a Monday morning. Marcus had woken up at 4 a.m. to iron his only dress shirt and polish his father's old dress shoes. His mother had tears in her eyes when she saw him dressed up, looking so much like his late father. Remember who you are, Marcus, she said, straightening his tie. You earned this chance. Now show them what you can do. The Mitchell Developments building stood 60 stories tall in downtown Chicago, its glass windows gleaming in the morning sun. Marcus took a deep breath before walking through the revolving doors into the massive marble lobby. The security guard, an older man named Bill, greeted him with a warm smile. You must be Marcus, Bill said, handing him an ID card. Mr. Mitchell left special instructions for you. Take the executive elevator to the 58th floor. Ms. Rodriguez is waiting to show you around. The executive elevator was bigger than Marcus's bedroom. As it climbed higher, his stomach did flips, not from the height, but from excitement and nervousness. When the doors opened, he found himself in a world of glass offices and busy people in expensive suits. Ms. Rodriguez, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s, was waiting for him. Welcome to Mitchell Developments, Marcus. Your story has inspired a lot of people here. She led him through the office, introducing him to different department heads. Some employees smiled warmly, while others barely looked up from their computers. Marcus could feel their doubts. What was a teenager from South Chicago doing in their prestigious company? But he remembered his mother's words and kept his head high. The tour ended at a smaller office with a window view of Lake Michigan. This will be your workspace, Ms. Rodriguez explained. You'll split your time between different departments: architecture, urban planning, and project management. Mr. Mitchell wants you to understand every aspect of the business. Just then, Thomas Mitchell himself walked in. He looked different here than at the hospital, more commanding, but his eyes still had that same kindness. Ready to get started, Marcus? He asked, placing a thick folder on the desk. Yes, sir, Marcus replied confidently, even though his heart was racing. Good, because I have your first assignment. Thomas opened the folder to reveal plans for a new development. We're planning to build a community center in South Chicago. I want you to review these plans and tell me what's missing. Marcus looked at the plans carefully. He knew South Chicago better than anyone in this building. After studying the drawings for several minutes, he spoke up. Sir, the design is beautiful, but it's missing some important things for our community. Go on, Thomas encouraged. There's no space for job training programs, which we really need. The computer lab is too small, and there's no daycare area for working parents. Also, the entrance. Marcus hesitated, then continued. It's designed to impress, but it might intimidate people who need the services most. Thomas's face broke into a broad smile. This is exactly why I wanted you here, Marcus. You see things we miss. You understand the community because you live there. I want you to work with our architects to revise these plans. Ms. Rodriguez looked impressed. I'll set up meetings with the design team right away. As they left his office, Marcus noticed something on his desk he hadn't seen before: a laptop, several textbooks about architecture and urban planning, and a note from Sarah Mitchell. The note read, "Thank you for saving our daughter's future. Now it's our turn to help you build yours." Marcus sat down at his desk, opened one of the books, and began to read. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey, but for the first time in his life, all doors seemed open to him. He was ready to walk through them, one step at a time. 3 months into his internship, Marcus faced his biggest challenge yet. He stood in front of Mitchell Development's board of directors, his hands slightly shaking as he held his presentation notes. The room was filled with serious-looking executives in expensive suits, and Thomas Mitchell sat at the head of the table. Go ahead, Marcus, Thomas encouraged. Show them your vision for the community center. Marcus took a deep breath and began his presentation. The past months hadn't been easy. He had worked extra hours every day, studying architecture books late into the night after finishing his high school homework. Some employees still looked down on him, but others, like Ms. Rodriguez and the design team, had become his mentors. The original community center plan was good. Marcus began, his voice growing stronger with each word. But with our changes, it can be great. We've redesigned it to truly serve South Chicago's needs. He clicked through slides showing the new designs. The intimidating glass entrance was replaced with a welcoming brick facade. The computer lab was now 3 times larger, with a job training center next door. A daycare center occupied the east wing, and the roof featured a community garden. The best part, Marcus continued, is that these changes won't increase the budget. By using local materials and adjusting the layout, we're actually saving money while adding more services. One of the board members, Mr. Harrison, who had always been skeptical of Marcus, raised his hand. And how would you know what works in construction planning? You're just a high school student. Before Thomas could defend him, Marcus answered confidently. Sir, you're right. I am a student, but I'm also someone who has lived in South Chicago all my life. I've seen what works and what doesn't. I've spent 3 months learning from your amazing team, and I put everything I've learned into this project. He clicked to his final slide, showing letters of support from local community leaders. I took the initiative to share our plans with community organizations. They're not just excited, they're ready to partner with us. The local construction union has even offered to provide apprenticeships to neighborhood youth during the building process. The room fell silent. Then Ms. Rodriguez started clapping, followed by others. Even Mr. Harrison looked impressed. Thomas Mitchell beamed with pride. After the meeting, Thomas called Marcus into his office. Sarah was there too, holding their newborn daughter, Emma. The baby who had been endangered during the car accident was now a healthy 2-month-old, with bright eyes and a happy smile. "You get more than prove yourself today," Thomas said. "You showed everyone why I believe in you. The board has unanimously approved your design." Sarah adjusted Emma in her arms. "We have something else to tell you, Marcus. Thomas and I have been talking. We want to create a scholarship program," Thomas continued. "The Mitchell Future Builders Program. It will cover full college tuition for promising students from underserved communities who want to study architecture or urban development. And we want you to be its first recipient." Marcus felt overwhelmed. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Sarah smiled. "You've earned this, Marcus. And while you're in college, you'll keep your position here as a part-time intern. We want you to help us select future scholarship recipients too." "Think about it," Thomas added. "You won't just be building buildings, you'll be building opportunities for others like yourself." Marcus thought about all the young people in his neighborhood who had dreams but no way to achieve them. With this program, he could help change that. "Yes," he said firmly. "I would be honored, but I have one condition." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The community center needs a name," Marcus said. "I want to call it the Johnson Mitchell Center, after both our families, because it took both of our worlds coming together to make it happen." Sarah wiped a tear from her eye, and Thomas stood up to shake Marcus's hand. "That's perfect," he said. "Just perfect." As Marcus walked home that evening, he felt like he was walking on air. He couldn't wait to tell his mother the news. Her son wasn't just going to college. He was going to help build a better future for their entire community. Word about the Mitchell Future Builders program spread quickly through South Chicago. 1 month after the announcement, Marcus found himself in Thomas's office, surrounded by stacks of scholarship applications. Each one told a story of dreams and determination that reminded him of his own journey. "I never expected so many applications," Marcus said, looking at the hundreds of folders on the desk. He had spent every evening after school reading through them, making careful notes about each candidate. Thomas smiled. "People just needed a chance, Marcus. Like you did." He picked up one of the applications Marcus had marked as promising. "Tell me about this one." "That's Maria Rodriguez," Marcus explained eagerly. "She's a senior at my school. She helps her parents run their small construction company and has already designed 3 small renovation projects in the neighborhood. Her drawings are amazing." As they discussed the candidates, Sarah walked in with 6-month-old Emma, who immediately reached for Marcus. Over the past months, he had become like family to the Mitchells, and Emma always brightened up when she saw him. "How's the community center coming along?" Sarah asked, bouncing Emma on her hip. Marcus pulled out his tablet to show them the latest construction photos. The Johnson Mitchell Center was taking shape, its warm brick walls rising from the foundation. Local workers, many from Marcus's neighborhood, were getting valuable experience through the apprenticeship program he had suggested. "We're ahead of schedule and under budget," Marcus reported proudly. "The community garden on the roof is already getting donations of plants and tools, and the computer lab equipment arrives next week." Just then, Ms. Rodriguez knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see Marcus." She stepped aside to reveal Marcus's mother, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Mom?" Marcus stood up, worried. "Is everything okay?" She held up an envelope with a university logo. "This just came for you. I couldn't wait until you got home." The room fell silent as Marcus opened the letter with shaking hands. He read it once, twice, then looked up with a huge smile. "I got in. Full scholarship to the School of Architecture." The room erupted in cheers. Thomas shook his hand, Sarah hugged him, and his mother couldn't stop crying happy tears. Even little Emma clapped her tiny hands, though she didn't understand why everyone was so excited. "We never doubted you for a moment," Thomas said. "And now, we have something else to show you." He led everyone to the conference room, where the design team was waiting with new blueprints spread across the table. Marcus recognized the street layout. It was his old neighborhood. "Remember when you said the community center was just the beginning?" Thomas asked. "Well, you were right. We want to start a full neighborhood revitalization project. new affordable housing, small business spaces, parks, and a training center. And we want you to be part of the design team, even while you're in college. Marcus stared at the plans, his mind racing with possibilities. We could create opportunities for so many people, he said softly. His mother put her arm around him. You see, son, this is what happens when you save someone's life. You don't just save them, you start a chain reaction of good things. Speaking of which, Sarah added, we've chosen the first 10 Mitchell Future Builders Scholarship recipients. We'd like you to make the announcement at the community center's opening ceremony next month. Marcus looked around the room at these people who had become his second family. From the day he helped Sarah and Emma during the accident, his life had changed in ways he never imagined. But the best part wasn't what he had received, it was what he could now give to others. You know what this means? He asked, pointing to the neighborhood plans. Every one of those scholarship recipients can be part of building this. We're not just changing buildings, we're changing lives. Thomas nodded approvingly. That's exactly what this company needed, Marcus. Someone who sees beyond the blueprints to the people whose lives we're touching. The day of the Johnson Mitchell Center's opening ceremony arrived on a bright Saturday morning. A large crowd gathered outside the building, including local families, community leaders, news reporters, and all 10 scholarship recipients. Marcus stood behind the podium, looking at the faces of people he had grown up with. The building behind him was everything he had dreamed it would be. The warm brick walls welcomed everyone, large windows let in natural light, and the rooftop garden was already blooming with vegetables and flowers. A banner hung across the entrance, built by the community, for the community. 5 months ago, Marcus began his speech. I was just a high school student walking home from my job at Save Mart. I never imagined that helping someone in need would lead to all of this. He gestured to the building behind him. From his place on the stage, he could see his mother in the front row, sitting between Sarah Mitchell and Ms. Rodriguez. Thomas stood nearby, holding little Emma, who was now 8 months old and wearing a tiny hard hat that the construction team had given her as a joke. But this center isn't about me, Marcus continued. It's about all of us. It's about what happens when people from different worlds come together and share their dreams. He paused, looking at the scholarship recipients sitting together in their new suits and dresses. And speaking of dreams, I'd like to introduce you to 10 amazing young people who are about to start their own journeys. One by one, the scholarship recipients came forward as Marcus called their names. There was Maria Rodriguez, whose construction drawings had impressed everyone. James Carter, who had taught himself computer programming at the local library. Sophia Washington, who had designed an award-winning sustainable housing project for her science fair. These talented students, Marcus announced, are the first Mitchell Future Builders Scholarship recipients. They'll receive full college tuition, internships at Mitchell Developments, and a chance to help rebuild our community. The crowd erupted in applause. Thomas stepped forward to hand Marcus a large pair of scissors for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. But before cutting the ribbon, Marcus had one more surprise to share. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell don't know about this yet, he said with a smile, but the scholarship recipients and I have been working on something special. He nodded to Maria, who unveiled a covered plaque near the entrance. The plaque read, "The Emma Mitchell Children's Library," with a beautiful etching of a young girl reading under a tree. Sarah gasped and hugged Thomas, who was trying to hide his tears. Every child deserves a chance to dream big, Marcus explained. This library, named after the little girl whose life brought us all together, will be filled with books about architecture, engineering, and design. We want to inspire the next generation of builders and dreamers. After cutting the ribbon, Marcus led everyone on a tour of the center. The computer lab was already full of new machines. The job training center had a schedule of upcoming classes posted. In the daycare area, children played while their parents could work or take classes. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Marcus found a quiet moment with Thomas and Sarah in the new library. Emma was asleep in Sarah's arms, clutching a small toy building block. "You've started something remarkable here, Marcus," Thomas said, looking around at all the happy faces. "This isn't just a building. It's a bridge between communities." Marcus nodded. "And it's only the beginning. Next week, we start planning the affordable housing project. Half of our scholarship recipients have already volunteered to help with the designs." Sarah adjusted Emma's blanket. You know what amazes me most? That terrible day when our car crashed. It could have been the worst day of our lives. Instead, it became the day that changed everything for the better. That's because Marcus didn't just save us, Thomas added. He showed us how to save others, too. Marcus watched through the window as his mother chatted with Ms. Rodriguez and some of the scholarship recipients' families. The walls between different parts of Chicago were coming down, one brick at a time, and he was helping to build something much better in their place. 3 years passed quickly. Marcus sat in his college dorm room late one night, surrounded by architecture books and design drawings. He was now in his junior year, maintaining a perfect GPA while still working part-time at Mitchell Developments. His latest project kept him up most nights, but he didn't mind. It was too important to rush. His phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Mitchell. Big presentation tomorrow. Get some sleep, son. Marcus smiled at the word son. Over the years, the Mitchells had become like a second family to him, and he had watched little Emma grow from a baby into a curious 3-year-old who loved to build towers with wooden blocks. The next morning, Marcus stood in the familiar boardroom at Mitchell Developments, but this time he wasn't nervous. The board members who had once doubted him now respected his opinions. Even Mr. Harrison had become one of his strongest supporters. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began. 3 years ago, we built the Johnson Mitchell Center. Today, I want to show you how we can transform all of South Chicago. He unveiled his master plan, the project he had been working on for months. The plan showed a complete neighborhood transformation. There were affordable apartment buildings designed to look like luxury condos, small business spaces with low rent for local entrepreneurs, green parks, and even a technical training institute. The best part, Marcus explained, is that we can build this using local talent. Remember those 10 scholarship students from 3 years ago? They're all excelling in their programs. Maria Rodriguez's designs have already won 2 national competitions. James Carter's innovative software is saving us millions in project management. Thomas beamed with pride as Marcus continued. And we have 20 more scholarship students now, all eager to help rebuild their community. This isn't just about buildings, it's about creating a model that other cities can follow. The board members leaned forward, interested. Marcus clicked to his next slide, showing the financial projections. By using sustainable materials and local labor, we can complete this project under budget. The Training Institute will ensure we have skilled workers for future projects. It's an investment that will pay for itself many times over. After the presentation, the board voted unanimously to approve the project. As people filed out of the room, Thomas held Marcus back. "There's someone here to see you," he said with a mysterious smile. They walked to Thomas's office, where Marcus found his mother talking with Sarah and Emma. But there was someone else, a representative from the National Architecture Association. "Mr. Johnson," the representative said, standing up to shake his hand. "We've been following your work. The Johnson Mitchell Center has been nominated for the Urban Development Excellence Award. It's the first time a student-led project has ever been nominated." Marcus was speechless. His mother wiped tears from her eyes as Sarah hugged her. Emma tugged at Marcus's sleeve, demanding to be picked up. "Uncle Marcus," she said. She had started calling him that last year. "Does this mean you're famous now?" Everyone laughed, breaking the emotional moment. "No, Emma," Marcus replied, lifting her up. "It means our community is being recognized for what it can achieve when people work together." Later that evening, Marcus drove through South Chicago, looking at the neighborhoods that would soon be transformed. The Johnson Mitchell Center was busy as usual, the computer lab full of students, the daycare center echoing with children's laughter, the rooftop garden providing fresh vegetables for local families. He parked outside his old apartment building, where his mother still lived despite his offers to move her somewhere bigger. "This is home," she always said. And now it's becoming the home we always knew it could be. As he walked inside, Marcus thought about how one moment had changed everything, not just for him, but for an entire community. That day when he helped Sarah and Emma had started a chain reaction of positive change that was still growing. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text from the scholarship students, congratulating him on the nomination. "You showed us what's possible," Maria had written. "Now we're going to help you build it." Marcus looked out his window at the city lights. Tomorrow, they would break ground on the first new building. Another step forward, another dream becoming reality. And this was still just the beginning. 5 years had passed since that fateful evening when Marcus helped Sarah Mitchell and her unborn child. Now, on a warm spring morning, he stood on a stage in front of the completed South Chicago Renewal Project, preparing to give the most important speech of his life. The neighborhood had transformed beyond recognition. Beautiful apartment buildings lined clean streets, small businesses thrived in modern spaces, and parks brought green life to what was once concrete. The Technical Training Institute was already at full capacity, teaching local residents valuable skills in construction and technology. Marcus, now a college graduate with a master's degree in architecture, watched as familiar faces filled the seats. His mother sat in the front row, elegant in a new dress. Beside her were Thomas and Sarah Mitchell, with 8-year-old Emma bouncing excitedly in her chair. Behind them sat all 30 Mitchell Future Builders scholarship recipients, past and present. 10 years ago, Marcus began, adjusting the microphone. This neighborhood was a place people wanted to leave. Today, it's a place people want to call home. He paused, looking at the crowd. But this story isn't about buildings. It's about what happens when people believe in each other. He gestured to the various projects around them. Every building you see was designed by someone from this community. Maria Rodriguez, our first scholarship recipient, designed that beautiful training institute. James Carter's Technology Center is helping hundreds of young people learn coding. And Sophia Washington's green energy systems are making these buildings environmentally friendly and affordable to maintain. Thomas Mitchell stood up to join Marcus on stage. When Marcus saved my wife and daughter that day, I thought I could repay him by offering opportunities. But he showed us that the greatest opportunity is the chance to help others. Thomas turned to face Marcus, which is why the board has made a decision. Sarah and Emma joined them on stage, carrying a large envelope. Emma, who still called Marcus Uncle Marcus, despite being old enough to know better, could barely contain her excitement. Marcus Johnson, Thomas announced, Mitchell Developments is opening offices in 10 other cities, focusing on community renewal projects. We want you to lead these projects as our new Director of Community Development. The crowd erupted in cheers. Marcus's mother burst into tears of joy, but Thomas wasn't finished. And, he continued, the Mitchell Future Builders program will expand to all 10 cities, with you overseeing the selection of scholars. Your vision will help transform communities across the country. Marcus stepped back to the microphone, overwhelmed with emotion. I accept this honor, but with one condition. He smiled at the scholarship recipients. I want each city's program to be led by our graduates. They know better than anyone how to build communities, not just buildings. Later that evening, Marcus walked through the neighborhood with his mother, Thomas, Sarah, and Emma. They stopped at the Johnson Mitchell Center, where a new photo exhibition showcased the neighborhood's transformation. Look, Uncle Marcus. Emma pointed to an old newspaper clipping. It showed a much younger Marcus standing next to a crashed car, the day he had saved Emma and her mother. You know what I see when I look at that photo? Marcus asked her. I see how one moment can change everything, not just for one person, but for an entire community. Sarah hugged her daughter close. And to think, if you hadn't walked down that street that day. It wasn't chance. Marcus's mother said softly, it was purpose. Marcus was meant to be there, just like he was meant to do all this. She gestured to the transformed neighborhood around them. As they walked back, they passed a group of teenagers leaving the computer lab at the center. One of them stopped Marcus. Mr. Johnson, I submitted my application for the Mitchell Scholarship. I want to be an architect like you. Marcus looked at the young man, seeing himself from years ago. What's your name? David, sir. David Martinez. Well, David, Marcus smiled. Let me tell you something I learned. Sometimes the biggest dreams start with the smallest acts of kindness. Keep dreaming big. As the sun set over the new South Chicago, Marcus looked at his family, both birthed and chosen, and felt a deep sense of completion. The circle that began with one act of courage had grown into countless circles of opportunity, each one touching more lives than he could have imagined. The neighborhood wasn't just rebuilt, it was reborn, and its story was just beginning.